You're listening to Expertly Said, a podcast on the art and impact of communication. I'm Kristen Sweeney, founder and CEO of Every Little Word.
My guest today is Meredith Dennis, founder and CEO at Compression Marketing. Meredith is a highly collaborative marketing and leadership professional with 20 plus years of experience driving meaningful growth for organizations in regulated B2B industries. Her professional philosophy is rooted in building strong relationships, devising appropriate and scalable strategies, and achieving results. She launched Compression Marketing on the principle that it's our responsibility to connect with people and help them solve problems. No gimmicks or promises that are too good to believe. No chasing down random numbers on a spreadsheet. Just sound, practical approaches that have a real impact and help organizations stand out in their markets. Meredith, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I can't wait for our conversation today.
I know. I'm really excited. We had to stop ourselves, right, from like having the podcast before the podcast.
Right, exactly. It's like, wait, did we record this? Shoot.
Pause. We saved it all up for this conversation. So
Yeah.
I would love to go back and hear a little bit about origin story, how you ended up in the marketing field, and maybe what kind of aspects of communication brought you there along the way.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm one of those, I feel like at this point, it's a rare occurrence that I still do the thing that I went to college
Oh,
for
amazing. Yeah.
decades ago. I actually got a degree in marketing and journalism and have managed to maintain a career in that area for the last 22 plus years. And so I've worked almost exclusively in B2B environments, and not even that, the sort of regulated industries. So a lot of organizations they face a lot of compliance issues. They face a lot of bureaucracy in many cases in terms of how decisions get made and things along those lines. It's the decision-making committee that gets anything out the door, and things typically take maybe a little bit longer to accomplish. I sometimes I lovingly call it sort of the unsexy part of business. I've spent my entire career in those spaces and founded Compression Marketing right around 2 years ago with the intention of being able to maintain those things that I philosophically believe in that you mentioned at the top of our conversation. I saw way too many things veering into what I felt was just the wrong way to do our work. And I wanted to be able to change that in a productive and impactful way.
That's awesome. It is really interesting, actually, to hear you describe your career journey as a little bit more of a straight shot. It is unusual, but also very cool. As someone who's had multiple careers and is now in this place, I love that clarity from a much younger age. So you talked about founding Compression Marketing, which brings me to my next question. And this is me just getting to ask about stuff that interests me. Why the name Compression Marketing?
I love that question. So it is definitely one of those things that it's a story I love to tell. The name Compression Marketing is actually rooted in a personal story completely outside of work. I restore classic cars with my dad. And I very early on understood the impact of a combustion engine and the force of compression in an engine that would create heat and momentum and progress and all of those things that make the engine go. And so when I was really thinking about what I wanted compression marketing to be, I thought a lot about those stories of working on cars with my dad and problem solving and making things work and making things go. And so it's those principles of compression that create heat and momentum and progress that are meant to really come through in the ethos of what we do. And if you ever look at the logo, there's some sort of hidden meanings. You'll see sort of looks like a compression spring if you look at it just right. And our horizontal logo actually looks like a key. So a key to start the engine to create momentum, with all of the intention being around making it move and making it go forward in a way that works every time.
What an amazing analogy and a great personal story. And I think that as someone who comes from a creative background, that just makes me think about I think sometimes in a B2B context for marketing, we want to be very on the surface, right? But coming from a more creative background originally, with my background in theater, there's so much that happens that it's it's the work an actor's doing. It's the way a choice is made for set design, or how the blocking is staged, or the lighting choices that aren't consciously conveyed, but have this sort of depth to them. And that's really just what that makes me think of, is this, you could engage with you, never know that story, but at the same time, the depth is there. And I believe that still makes some kind of impression, whether it's something we kind of consciously latch onto or not.
Yeah, the concept of story, right? Especially with, coming from theater, right? The importance of story and how that connects
Mhm.
with people, with audiences, with decision makers, whatever it might be. That feeling of story, I think, is so important. So it's a great question. I always love getting to tell that
Yeah.
story.
Oh, I'm so happy I asked. It's a wonderful answer. So in compression marketing, you're talking, you said, regulated B2B industries. You talked a little bit about maybe some extra red tape, a little bit more of challenge in decision making. Your audience is like SMBs, right? Small and medium sized businesses rather than kind of big enterprises. Okay. So I'm curious if you can share a little bit more about some of those struggles, and also maybe on what you see on the messaging side of how that regulation plays a role in what they can and can't say, claims they can or can't make, things like that, as maybe being one of the obstacles or opportunities for those types of companies.
Yeah, always a silver lining, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I'll start there with some of those messaging challenges, and it's very true in a lot of cases in those regulated spaces, things like education, healthcare,
Hmm.
financial services, things where what you claim and what you say are incredibly important. You're also in a space where you cannot make inappropriate commitments or guarantees, and so it's very, very important to remember that words matter a
Heck
lot.
yeah.
Uh, Word choice is very, very important, but intent is also important. And sometimes there's a rub in trying to articulate something simply and clearly while still meeting the obligations of, in some cases, what regulators would require you do. And
Mhm.
so, a great example is in a lot of healthcare environments, you can't say free. You have to say something like no cost or zero cost or things along those lines that are inherently jargon filled, but
Mhm.
are the way that we are obligated to communicate. And so that's one of the biggest things I think in some of those regulated spaces is how do we speak plain English to our audience in a way that does not feel pedantic and that does not feel like we're being performative. That's just honest and open. So
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
always an important part of a conversation around some of the challenges we face from messaging.
Yeah. I think about what you said about that silver lining. And I think one of the benefits in a way, or that kind of silver lining, is you you don't really even have the opportunity or the incentive to be overblown, to be hyperbolic, to exaggerate claims. And one of the things that we think about a lot, and we do work in some regulated industries as well, a little bit of healthcare, certainly pharma and life sciences, a little bit of work in higher ed, um, is that the the messaging externally should reflect the experience of what's happening internally, and that actually that's enough, right? Like, well positioned, well thought through, but it doesn't have to be marketing's over here trying to be big and flashy, and then the work is like quite sensible and very deep and technical, like that those things should align, and aligning customer expectations from the moment they kind of engage with the organization all the way through to what is that experience like of engaging or working with you. So in some ways I see the need to strip down um, as beneficial. We Years ago we had a client. a bit of a challenging client. And at one point, the feedback we got from them was, please don't use any adjectives. And we were like, all right, well, that's a choice, right? But years later, I could kind of look back and understand the intent there, which was not wanting to overpromise or overclaim. And in some cases, these were was a set of clients, and we were sometimes pushing them to be a little more self-promotional and a little like, you can claim this reasonably, and maybe you're just being a little too hesitant. So there's that dynamic too. But I kind of get it too, right? Of like, don't be too much. Sometimes being straightforward and I think we're going to talk a little bit about this, but like, you talk about helping organizations be unique and that differentiation. That's not in just the adjectives you add on in front of the thing you do. It's the
Exactly.
thing you do and how you do the thing you do, not a few extra words you kind of throw in there to try and sound different.
Yeah, exactly. And that was, you were sort of alluding to it, I think, in part of that other question too, around in these SMB, small, medium-sized business environments, there are a lot of cases you're in one of two camps, one of two or three camps. You may be working with a funding source, right? So you might have private equity funding behind you that has certain demands that need to be met or certain things that they're asking for. You may be working in maybe a little bit more of a startup mode. And so you maybe don't know what you don't know, or you're trying to go really fast, and also trying to stay within the bounds of sort of any required compliance. And then maybe the third option that I see a lot is when organizations are very much in that we have a new idea, we don't know how to go to market, we don't know how to talk about this, we know it's a good idea, but we don't know how to get it out into the world.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I think about those sort of three areas and what it takes to be successful in any one of those lanes, it does take exactly what you were saying, that what truly makes me or this or us unique, truly unique. And that takes some time and some effort, because table stakes are saving time, saving money, saving effort. Those are no longer, you can't use those as differentiators
Mm-hmm.
anymore,
Mm-hmm.
anywhere. Like, that's just sort of understood. It's how you talk about those things in a different way relative to the space you're operating in. And
Yeah.
so when we talk about the way to stand out and to truly be yourself and represent yourself to a customer or customer base in an authentic way, that takes a lot of energy and a lot of work to accomplish. And it is the thing that I think people are often, when they say, well, marketing is too slow or takes too long, I think it's this part of the process that they might be talking about. But I can only reinforce how important it is to spend the time to
Mm-hmm.
get really clear on what's different and unique, because that is what's going to allow you to succeed in any of those business growth goals.
I always love this conversation. So early on in my agency's history, we like didn't touch messaging, right? We were kind of a capture only, like, what's your value proposition? You're going to tell us, what are your differentiators? We, over time, realized, one, we were more than capable of helping them develop it. And that was, just a confidence thing that I needed to develop. But also that companies didn't have it, right? So if we just captured it, there was going to be this kind of big gap. But one of the things I always am interested in talking with people about in this regard is kind of the difference between like teasing out and developing. So in other words, I believe that most organizations, because they're a collection of unique people, have something kind of inherently differentiated. But I also think that in some cases, like, you may need to actually change how the organization works to put a little more shine on it, right? So is that an experience you've had? And can you talk about how, if so, how the kind of like messaging development, looking at what makes you unique in the market, might actually need to kind of reinform the way an organization sort of does business?
definitely. It's a really great question to think about. It's, a lot of times we'll say we need to hold up a mirror, and sometimes that's really difficult to do because we don't necessarily love what we see. But I think
Sometimes you're a hot mess. You know what I
you're
mean?
right.
Like sometimes your hair is disheveled and you get the mirror, but that's just
that's just life, right? um, but the way that I think about that is the best way that I can talk about it is you have to stop being selfish. This is really hard to hear, but it's not about you. It's not about you at all. And it is typical to see a lot of marketing and sales messaging that is very self-centered, very all about us, how cool we are, how great we are, how much better we are, without the important lens of what your customer or your prospect cares about. They may not care that you have the bluest of the blue thing. They may not care that you have the biggest of the best. That may not even matter to them in terms of what their decision-making set looks like. So when it comes to how to approach that process, it really is about putting down the ego and saying, oh my goodness, we have to stop talking about ourselves. We have to get really clear on who we help and how we help them based on their circumstances. There is a really great book, How Coffee and Kale Compete, and it talks about the jobs to be done theory. And these are all, very flowery ways to talk about what is your customer need solved and how do you solve it? And the ethos being that when coffee and kale compete, well, you could have a great cup of coffee or you could have a kale smoothie for breakfast. They're both options, but they're both very different options, right? Or you could have both.
have both.
You could have both. And so it's understanding the choices that they have to make and how they're evaluating those choices, because someone who may be going for the quad shot venti latte has different motivations than the person that's taking the kale smoothie. They're probably thinking about those decisions a little differently, and you have to talk to them in different ways. The other thing that I think is really interesting that comes out of that process is you have to remember, especially in the B2B environments that we're talking about, sometimes you're also competing with no decision at all. The decision of a business and an entity to not do something is your competition. They're not going to invest the capital, the money, the people, the time, whatever it might be. So that's the other piece to remember is how do you talk about yourself and your product or service relative to the status quo?
Yeah. Which is nothing at all, or a spreadsheet. For a lot of solutions, right? It's like
Yes.
you've got to be better than a spreadsheet. As an aside, can't do kale in smoothies, although I love kale cooked in salads. Always spinach for me.
I'm with you. I'm with you.
So I love this, and I think it's a great segue into the next piece I want to ask about, which is these hard conversations, thinking about not just communicating with your audience and your customer, but the internal communication required to challenge assumptions, to ask questions, to maybe tell some hard truths. What skills or techniques in terms of communication with your teams and with your clients are you using to be effective when you have these conversations?
Yeah, I think there's probably two really important pieces. The first is being genuinely curious. Ask questions with the intent to understand and to learn. Don't ask questions with a predetermined answer already in mind. So really maintaining a genuine sense of curiosity and a learning approach. Ask questions with the intent to understand something. I am often, some people will look at me sideways and go, "Are you done asking me questions yet?" Because I want to ask and understand and really get to the root of things.
Yeah.
So that's one, is be curious and really seek to learn and understand. And then the other piece is to listen at least 80% of the time. And there's a big difference between listening and hearing. You can hear something from someone and take it in and reply to them with your pre-baked advice or expertise ready and teed up to go. When you're listening and really getting to their feelings, their tone, what they are struggling with or care about or wish would happen, you can frame what you say and how you say it in a much more powerful way that doesn't come off as, well, I know things and you don't, and you just need to listen to me.
Uh-huh.
There's a big problem these days with there's a strong desire for just give me the answer. And so people are just sort of sliding something across the desk at you and saying, good luck, here you go, have fun, wish you the best.
Yeah.
And that rarely works long term. So it's the asking questions and the listening that are key. And then when
Uh-huh.
you do go to respond or to engage, you're doing it from a collaborative perspective and constantly seeking to understand and check that that's making sense, that it's resonating, and not just assuming that what you said is the right thing.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I think a lot of times, and we're going to get to metrics and quantifying in a second, we're looking to, in conversations, like validate, right? And that can be important. Like, I want to validate my experience, I want to validate my assumption, but that is going in with a particular hypothesis. And so I imagine, especially early on in an engagement, you're advocating for a much more open open conversation. I bet you're surprised sometimes, about I mean, something we think about a lot in kind of a different context, but something I see when it comes to content is that sometimes there's a weird ways in which we don't act consistently um, in the way we treat our audiences, our customers, right? And so for our agency, one way that we see this show up in the world is like companies will develop these buyer personas, and it's like all, C-suite, right? It's very sophisticated buyers, all these problems, everything they think about. And then frankly, the content that you create for these buyers it's slop, it's lazy, it's not worthy of them. It's bait and switch downloads that just feel like summaries or sales pitches. And it's like, where did the disconnect happen between thinking your buyers are these smart, sophisticated people, especially again in this B2B context,
Yeah.
where they've got a lot of like very particular business considerations, and then creating this for them and expecting them to drive value from it. So I a little bit lost my train of thought, but I guess I was just saying that, no, I didn't. I'm back to it now. Okay. Assuming that it isn't coming in and saying, I know better than you, that there is, maybe you need to reframe for an organization how they're looking at marketing, but they probably at some point connected a series of dots to get to what they are doing today.
Yeah, yeah. And I think you touched on something that I think is really important and maybe gets overlooked a lot is the consistency factor through all of those touch points, right? They've started to connect dots, and we're in a space where a sales cycle is much longer,
Oh,
right?
yes.
You've got people, this is not the checkout aisle at the grocery store. This is potentially 6, 12, 18, 24 months of thinking and planning and shopping and considering for some of these decisions to get made. Not always, but in general, we're talking about longer time frames, which means more touch points and different touch points. And we don't have the same level of visibility to where they are in that funnel that we used to.
Uh-huh.
And so knowing that, we have to be incredibly consistent from the first engagement, which could be an email or a social media post or an ad, all the way through all of the different ways that they are exposed to our message on our website, in any communications that they see, so that when they do get to the product they download or the conversation with your sales team, all of that feels and sounds the same. That's how you avoid that bait and switch feeling you mentioned.
Yeah.
And being really consistent, and you can't maintain that consistency without deeply understanding them. I think things get inconsistent when you're sort of throwing darts at a dartboard and hoping something sticks.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. All right, I got one more topic I want to hit with you before we go into our one big idea. So
Okay.
you're pretty forthright right across, and we heard it in your bio, across your own marketing about metrics, random numbers on a spreadsheet, not chasing metrics. I would love to chat a little bit more about your stance on data and metrics in marketing, where they're maybe helpful and where they aren't. So, yeah, and you kind of kicked this off by saying we don't have the same visibility into the funnel as maybe we used to, or told ourselves that we used to, based on how buyers are buying now, privacy regulations, things like that. So,
Yeah.
would love to get into that just a little bit.
Yeah. We have we have so much data that we can use and so many things that we can look at, and I find in many ways it's almost the accounting rule. It's like, well, what do you want the numbers to say? What do you
Yeah.
want them to mean? 1 plus 1 is still 2. And so there's an element of that at play where it's like, well, what do you want the numbers to represent? What do you want them to mean?
What is it? What
Good,
is a
bad, or
lead?
indifferent.
Yeah.
But the thing that I found happened over and over and over, and this was particularly in those sort of mid-market SMB businesses that have been around for a while. They've got their feet under them. They might have, somewhere in the neighborhood of 75 to 100 employees. They're doing millions of dollars in business, right? In those environments, this is where I see them plagued by this metrics chasing. There are numbers on a spreadsheet, whether it is a new customer target, a revenue growth goal, a retention number. Those are plastered up on a spreadsheet during the strategic planning process with lofty goals in mind. We're going to grow 25% next year. Based on what? How have you decided that this is how we're going to
Yeah.
approach the business? So in many cases, those goals are fantasies, unfortunately. And when you have a number like that, it's really, really hard to actually put a plan in place to achieve it that is consistently measurable. And so what I see happen is we're chasing that number for this at the sake of everything else. And these businesses get so focused on chasing a number on a spreadsheet that they forget the whole point of the work. They stop connecting with customers. They just spend more on ads. They stop caring about how their value proposition lands in the market, and they just spray out as many discounts as they can. So there's all of this sort of rushed bad behavior that starts to happen because we're so afraid of that number on a spreadsheet that we didn't really understand to begin with. And in a lot of cases, you might have, whether it's a CMO or a CRO, that is faced with justifying performance to a board. And they have to go in every quarter and talk about that number on a spreadsheet and all the things that they're doing to try and hit it. And then
Mhm.
when the results don't pan out, it's a really difficult conversation. And what I have found is that it is the frenzied, just try this, do that. This sort of spaghetti of tactics that we
Mhm.
hoped would work that
Mhm.
took us so far away from the whole point of what we were trying to accomplish.
Yeah, that's interesting. And something you said in the beginning of that was, you know, when you talk about setting goals, and particularly, the the unicorn every company is chasing, right? Is that we know reliably how to grow the business. We know exactly what to do, and we know that if we just do more of this thing, we can grow the business, and it's within our control, and it's a knob or it's a lever, and we just like turn it up. For every organization that finds that, it only works until it doesn't. So even many companies never get there, right? And it always feels a little like you're not quite sure. But even those that do, they do up to a point, and then they are swimming in a bigger pond with competitors. They have like oversaturated their market. Something has changed in the macro landscape. So even when you have it figured out, it only works until it doesn't. And so what I think is there's something there is a lot of rhetoric around testing in marketing, but I find in reality it's not treated with the same rigor, maybe on all sides, as it would be. Again, we work with some life sciences and pharma companies in an R&D process, right? Where you're giving things the time to develop and that process of testing is taken very seriously and methodically, versus we shut it on, spend 2 weeks, it didn't work, let's turn it off. Because if you are trying to grow, you are probably, most organizations are going to have to try some things that they fundamentally don't know if they will work, right?
Yes.
That they are
Yes.
experiments. And I think there's a discomfort with claiming something as a hypothesis or an experiment in marketing. It's very accepted, obviously, scientifically, because there's so much pressure to deliver a ROI, that sure thing. How many customers did this blog post get me? How many
Right.
customers did
Well,
this
and
ad
yeah,
set get me? It's
it's such a great point because there are um I'm thinking of some of the memes that I see on social media around, the marketer posted something on Facebook and 3 minutes later the CEO is like, "How many customers did we get?"
yeah.
and that propensity to let an experiment run and bring in that creative component of marketing, the art and science of marketing, to test things, to try things, and to have an appropriate propensity for risk,
Yep,
and understanding how to talk about what does success look like.
for sure.
um and I love what you said earlier about it works until it doesn't. In an age of algorithms and things that are truly out of our control what you can control to the best of your
Yeah.
ability and make decisions that are based on where you're trying to go, maybe not necessarily where you've been. And that's I think that's that science part of being reflective and being open to what those changes look like, because the reality is, depending on your phase of business, whether you are very, very early stage or in growth mode, your marketing budget is going to be and should be north of 20% in some circumstances. And all we're hearing right now is decreased budgets, decreased resources, less of this, less of that. And marketers, I think, are left going, so now what?
Yeah. Yeah. It's I was having a chat recently, and the numbers they were sharing, it was for some professional services organizations, the marketing spend. It didn't include team salaries, and sales was completely separate, but under 2% of revenue. So it's low. It's
And
a lot to ask for
yeah,
a small investment.
yeah.
Yeah. All right. I want to make sure we have some time to get into our one big idea. So we do this every episode, a chance for us to kind of dig in and get into the nitty gritty of one particular concept. And today's one big idea, we're going to talk about the human factor. So we set this up a little bit. We've got your approach is rooted in relationship building. So can you talk a little bit about what that human factor is? And I'm curious if you ever get pushback around, like, is this too old school? Like, are some companies like, why aren't we doing the easy in quotes kind of digital thing, right? Like, why do I have to be so involved? So I'd love to just hear a little bit more about this approach.
Yeah, absolutely. So I believe deeply in the power of human relationships and human connection and the benefit of community, and being in spaces with other people, having conversations, having productive dialogue. Um, One of the things that I have found again and again and again, and this sort of harkens back to a little bit of what we were talking about the spreadsheets, right, and just chasing a number. We forget that every deal we close and every new customer in the door is a human being that made a choice. And human beings make choices based on emotion and then they justify it with logic later.
Oh, 1,000,000%. I say this all the time. We love to pretend otherwise in B2B, right? We love to pretend as though we act logically.
Right.
Not
Right.
not
And so
so.
if we're making decisions, business or otherwise, based on emotion, emotion is typically rooted in, from a behavioral science perspective, in how we feel about something, which means we probably need to have some trust. We need to think about the credibility that this person comes with. We need to be able to say, how did they make me feel? Did I feel heard? Did I feel called out? Did I feel seen? Whatever the definition might be. It could also be an empathy thing. It's like, man, they really get how hard this is. They're not
Yeah.
trying to just shove a solution down my throat. They get that this is not easy to do and that they're in it with me.
Yeah.
And when you can help create that kind of a relationship with individuals and human beings, it influences the decision-making cycle in a very, very different way. It doesn't mean that you don't still run digital ads and do email campaigns and have a great website and do all of these other really appropriate and impactful tactics. But when it comes to personal relationships with individuals, I always see that reap rewards in a exponential fashion, because it has become novel now to spend that time as an individual, right? Everything is an automated response, or everything is a canned response, or everything is a template, or everything is non-human for the sake of speed. And I think that there are certainly ways to make our automated experiences feel more personal and connected now.
Mhm.
But at the end of the day, you're not going to replace sitting in a chair next to someone having a conversation and exploring a topic together, or being the one that sends a handwritten thank you note, or that actually sends a personal comment about something. And we're seeing how that behavior is translating into different results in digital environments. I think Instagram is a really great example right now. They had often been a very polished, produced type of platform for content, and
Mhm.
they are now in a position where their algorithms are favoring more of the human, unpolished, unfettered sort of commentary that before was not considered maybe as trustworthy or as relatable. And so all of that boils down to the importance of, how do we communicate and spend time together as people, as human beings?
Yeah. One of the things I think about that you and I, as agency owners, smaller agencies, but have an advantage, is that even for an executive, a decision maker at a bigger organization, I get it. Like, I get what it means to invest in a partner or a platform when it's my business on the line, how deeply invested I am. And I feel like that's something that I have the benefit of versus being a big part of an account team that's, part of a much larger organization serving clients. I get the stakes are very real for me. Um, Myself, been guilty of being someone who, as much as I might talk about needing patience and allowing your marketing that runway, also being like, so is it working yet? Because it's very real, and understanding that, I think, is like a one, I don't know, just like small bridge of empathy to working with folks that we can kind of bring to the table, because it does take a lot. And when you think about it that way, clients stop becoming numbers, they stop becoming portions of your revenue, and you really, I don't know, maybe it's because we're recording a little close to Thanksgiving, but like a lot of immense gratitude for the trust when somebody decides to actually become your client or customer. It's a lot of trust, especially, you know, we're not selling sneakers, we're not selling bananas. Like, we're selling big engagements that require a lot of commitment and collaboration. And it really is like quite an honor for someone to say, like, I'm going to invest my organization's resources in this relationship.
Yeah, it is. I think about that all the time, right? Going back to human beings making choices. And feeling that sense of gratitude and appreciation when you have been selected as the person to help them on that journey. There is nothing that I enjoy more about my work than actually seeing someone come out the other side of the work that we've been doing, and seeing the impact that that time and energy and focus led to in terms of outcomes. So there's a lot of joy in doing work this way that I think sometimes people overlook when they decide to be a business owner or when they decide to strike out on their own. um, it is hard work, and it's not without its own challenges, but it is immensely joyful and something that I could never imagine not being able to do the work that I do the way that I do it.
Yeah, I love that. So I'm curious then, when you talk about, you know, sitting side by side with people, having conversations, I imagine that's not just you with your clients, but talking about how they can do that with their customers as well. What what mindset maybe or skills do people have to adopt, right? Because I think this is the challenge is maybe we've absorbed for the last 10 plus years, 10 to 15 years, that we can invest our money in digital and someone else will kind of do it for us. And this message now is more, and I feel similarly, honestly, when I'm talking with a prospective client, I'm very invested in what does your business development function look like? Because most of the kinds of organizations we work with, this isn't the glory days of inbound leads flying in because you wrote a blog post. That's not how we're using content. And so we want to know what they have established in terms of sales and, that whole marketing and sales umbrella. So, so talk to me a little bit about how you help an organization think of themselves as like they are part of the marketing. Maybe they're part of the marketing team, even if that's not the function they sit under. Like what does that how do you kind of open those lines of communication?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, the umbrella of marketing has so many things that sit under it now.
Or
Right?
should, yeah.
It's no longer the Mad Men era of advertising. It is a very different, very sophisticated beast, in a lot of ways, especially in the spaces that we work in. And I think that there are, especially when I'm working with teams and departments that are next to marketing or are impacted by marketing's activities. When you're trying to create collaboration and sort of break down some of those some of those silos that start to just naturally develop between departments, it has to start sort of what I was talking about earlier with the questioning and the educating around what do these things mean to you, or what does success look like to you, and let me help share what marketing can do to impact what you're trying to accomplish.
Mhm.
A lot of times, I talk about the marketing and sales conflict where it's marketing versus sales instead of marketing and sales.
Mhm.
And there's a lot of power in the and of that. Um, but I think what it comes back to in terms of how do you own your piece of this success, it is about understanding who you serve and how you serve them. Meaning who is the audience and what problem are you solving? And if you at all layers of the organization can't articulate that pretty quickly and pretty similarly, then it's time to take a step back.
Yeah.
And I have found that some of the best ways to facilitate those conversations is to do things like workshops where you get out of your head a little bit and you get out of your day-to-day space, and you explore some ideas together and you learn from each other,
Mhm.
and really think about what it means to come together with principles and behaviors and philosophies. Um, the other thing that I will say about how to make that successful is going out and actually talking to your customers, asking them for their input, not asking to sell them anything, but just asking for their input goes a long way. Like having 2 or 3 really good conversations with customers is going to get you so much more information than all of the market analysis that you could go out
Yeah.
and pay for. And in addition to that, it actually makes those customers feel special.
Mhm.
There is in today's world, um, being asked, being invited, having the privilege, those are all things that make people feel connected and important,
Yeah.
and it only further reinforces what we're talking about around human connection, humanity, empathy, being a part of that process.
Yeah. In some ways, I think we tend to overcomplicate, right? Like personas, individual traits, psychographic, demographic, it is all really important. It is, absolutely. But sometimes there's like this, it's like we're again kind of looking at the data to inform us, or this thing we put in a document that we forget that we can just use common sense to. And you and I I'm a human, you're a human. Humans like some things and don't like other things. And we were, chatting before, and I was saying like sometimes that's the test of like this offer. If you saw this offer, would you scan the QR code? Like sometimes it's just asking a question that basic to be like,
Yeah.
yeah, no, probably not. Like,
Yeah. Well, and sometimes I look at stuff and I go, "Oh, please tell me that's not how we're doing this now."
yeah. Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, I love digging into this piece of the human approach. I think you are on the forefront of a lot of conversations I'm seeing start to bubble up. And I always think it's interesting when things like this are brand new ideas. Um, like,
Right.
hey.
I'm no lie. I see content from Gary Vee and Mark Cuban and some of these just incredibly massive, incredibly successful names. I'm like, I've been saying that too.
Oh, I know, right? I know. Everything old is new again. That's why I'm holding
Yeah.
on to my skinny jeans,
Right,
So
right. They will come back around.
I will. I will. All right. So before our time is up together, I want to take us through the last word. This is our lightning round segment. Every guest gets the same 5 questions, so just go with your gut on these. Are you
Okay.
ready?
I'm ready. I need a
All right.
buzzer.
Question 1, what's your favorite word to say out loud?
I like momentum.
I like that too.
It has a nice alliteration. Momentum.
It's a good one. Good one. And ties into our conversation about compression marketing. So there you
There
go.
you go.
Question 2, what's a word you know from reading, but you're not quite sure how to pronounce it out loud?
Behavioral.
I think you got it.
Yeah. Behavior. Yeah. You get to this tail end, you're like,
Yeah.
behavioral.
The IORAL. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good one. What's a phrase or saying you wish could be retired?
I can only say one. Um, let's circle back to this.
Okay. Fair. I need to reword this in light of a recent episode. What's a communication hill you're willing to plant a flag on?
I want to make sure I say this really clearly. The written word from a human being is always going to be important.
Meredith, I didn't even tell you to say that. What's the last thing you read, heard, or watched that really stuck with you?
Okay, so guilty pleasure. I watch a lot of reality TV, so I'm not going to have anything. I'm not going to have anything very, earth-shattering from that. I like a good monologue from like a character perspective, and so I was recently rewatching Landman, and I think in episode 1 or 2, Billy Bob Thornton's character has a monologue talking about windmills and the fuel industry and things like that. And the way that he tells that story, you're just left going, whew, okay. Like, you sort of have to exhale and think about everything that was said, whether you agree with it or not.
Yeah.
Just the delivery of it, really, if it sticks with you, it must have meant something, right?
Nice. And season 2 just came out, right?
It did. I think it premiered this week, in fact.
All right. Excellent. Thank you so much for joining us today, Meredith. If
Thanks for
listeners want to
having
learn
me.
more about you, absolutely. What a great conversation. Where can our listeners find you, find more about you?
Absolutely. So you can always go to our website, compressionmarketing.co. Yes, .co, not .com, .co. I've got tons of great content there and tons of information about all the work we do. You can also follow us on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Instagram. So your favorite social media choice of channel or channel of choice, those are the best places to find me and us.
Amazing. Thank you so much. We will talk to you soon.
Absolutely. Thanks, Kristen.
That's it for this episode of Expertly Said. We're produced by Every Little Word, a boutique content and communications agency. If you liked what you heard, you know what to do. Subscribe, share the episode with a colleague, or leave us a review. If you want to connect with me directly, please do. You can find me on LinkedIn. Just search Kristen Sweeney. Expertly Said will be taking a break over the holidays, but we'll be back in January with a new lineup of wonderful guests. Thanks for listening. We'll see you soon.